And we're back and we're live. How's it going, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it with a live edition of the latest Mets news and rumors show to get into here February 17th this evening, right past 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you guys so much to all the thousands that are watching this on live and to all the people that watch us on replay. Thank you so much as well. Please let us know your key takeaways in the comments down below as we're going to deep dive now that Frankie Montas has officially been set with injury for at least pretty much the first half of the season that we broke down in a video earlier today along with Pete Alonso's presser, so check that out in a separate form of content in case you guys haven't already whenever you get a chance. We will further touch on the Frankie Montas injury, but ultimately now, what is next for this Mets team? What are they going to do to replace Montas from this rotation? Are they going to stay internal? Are they going to go external for a Dylan Cease via trade? Could they have a Jose Quintana reunion? That is what we're going to touch on, as well as, speaking of reunions, let's get into a bit more on Jose Iglesias as he has been pleading for a Mets return and what actually happened by opening day. We will touch on the latest there, as well as Starling Marte. Maybe not so much a man that has been parted with, but more so a guy that could be parted with. Could Starling Marte be traded before opening day? Yes. Is it going to happen? That's a great question. We'll hear some remarks from himself over the past day or so, speaking to the media, getting into the latest with Pete Alonso's presser a little bit more. Juan Soto and other key Port St. Lucie takeaways is what we're deep diving this evening. Thank you guys so much for smashing the like and subscribe button as you chime in. And trust me, just like each and every one of you, I too am beyond frustrated with this entire debacle going on with yet another key Mets starter to begin spring training down with injury for the first half of the season. If it isn't the Mets having an injury happen of significance before the year even begins, is it even really a Mets season? I don't think so. All jokes aside though, folks, let's lock in. Let's get through it all. And again, I'm going to do a quick roll call and we'll go from there. So smash those buttons, folks. Thank you so much as always. And I see Ali, I see Thurman, I see Keto, how you doing? I see Mike Bartholomew. We got Barry, great member. And yes, I try to. It ain't easy being a dad and doing all this, but we make it work. G-Men, great member, how are you? Alan Gonzalez, longtime follower and member. We got Rapid, we got Robert, we got Xavier, we got my man Dave. Dave, I will be going to the P.O. box as soon as tomorrow or the following day, so be on the lookout for that. Someone else sent stuff my way as well, so I'll be checking that too. So again, thank you guys, everyone that sent things my way. It's always appreciated. I look forward to unveiling those Mets related things on the platform for each and every one of you guys. Frank Almeida, what's up, my man? Happy to have you in here. Tim Takeoff, Brian PB9, going up the list here a little bit more. My man Darren with the kind words and being a great member. Kish, great member. Jason, how you doing? Xavier, great member in here. We got Sir Woody, Pablo. Thank you guys. Come one, come all. Please know that if I do not get to your comment right away, it's nothing personal. It's just what happens when we have a lot of people chime into the live shows and then reoccurring viewers there after the fact on replay. And I did want to reiterate to some of you guys, especially if you're newcomers here on the platform, and what you can expect. We cover the Mets every single day here on the platform. That never wavers, so much so to the point that we come out with 1, 2, 3, 4+ forms of content depending on what exactly is happening with the Mets at that point in time throughout the day. Today was a 2 content day with a video and a live stream at minimum right now. And folks, we have already hit 31,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for that. And we're just under 200 subs away from 32,000, folks. And we're giving away a Mets jersey to one lucky subscriber of any player currently on the roster. It can be Juan Soto. It can be Pete Alonso. It can be Lindor. It can be whoever you want. I quite frankly don't care. What I care about is helping hook up you, the fan. So all you guys got to do to enter for your chance to win a Mets jersey, we already gave away a Juan Soto jersey at 30,000 subscribers, a Juan Soto Mets shirt jersey at 31,000. Now it could be Soto again or someone different depending on what you want as the winner. And all you got to do is subscribe as well as chiming into the live shows once we've surpassed 32,000 subscribers. Because usually once we hit 32K, I wait about a week from there, give enough of a time frame for people to know that a week from that point on, we will do a live show and we will randomly select a winner for you guys to get in on the action. But thank you guys so much for the support. Now let's get into this one. I got Mr. Chicken, Jose, how are you? We got Madeline, we got Steven here, great member. We got Haram, great member. We got Brennan, how are you? Everybody, thank you guys so much. It really does mean a lot. It really meant a lot too. I saw in the comments of the Pete Alonso presser earlier today from multiple Mets fans saying, Wardy, please go live. When are you going live to cover more of this? So I want to make sure that we got a live stream going going today, and we may have another live show happen before the end of the week. We'll have videos out for you pretty much on an everyday basis like we typically do, but live streams you guys will obviously see vary, and we will have our live shows officially beginning this weekend for post-game coverage, everybody. Yes, the post-game jingle will be back as soon as this weekend. For many of you guys who already know this, we cover every single Mets game throughout the year, spring training and regular season and postseason right after the game, usually in a live stream format. This year will be a combination of both live streams after the games as well as more daily recap videos like we're doing for everything in Mets land, the key storylines, the key headlines. The only difference will be us kind of recapping games now in that sense from similar formats of big Mets updates we've done on the past on the platform. So you guys will see some live shows after spring training games, especially notable ones. And then after games as well that are maybe duds, we'll wait a little bit and we'll go after the key takeaways in a pre-record format. Just want to relay that out to you guys as well, because we will be having the content continue as we reach the weekend, but it'll also be a little bit different from what you guys have been seeing on the platform throughout the course of the offseason, because the offseason has reached a close, spring training is here, and it's time to lock in and get ready for what's hopefully going to be a magical 2025 year for this amazing ball club. But Brandon with the $2 holla, thank you so much. Brandon in the chat says, Vladdy Jr. Mets jersey giveaway. It's so funny you mentioned Vladdy Jr. because I do fully intend on talking more on Vladdy tomorrow, everybody. So guys, I will just say this on the Vladdy front, and then we'll get into all the key topics here. He has a deadline, which is this midnight, to sign with the Toronto Blue Jays to a long-term extension. If Vladimir Guerrero does not, he will elect for agency next offseason at the young age of 26, just like Juan Soto this past offseason. And yes, I'm a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. advocate that would love to see him in Queens a year plus from now. But all right, guys, let's get into this one. We got Tim in here. We got Andrea. We got all you guys. It always means a lot. William, my friend, we're going to continue the show how I always do, brother, and you can either stay patient or just come back and watch it on replay once we got to the topics that are most intriguing and most interesting to you. It's going to work out in the end, I promise. Darren with the $5 holla says, Merrill Kelly for Ryan Clifford. Is Kelly controllable for multiple years, and what type of starter is he? I heard this floated today. An interesting thought. I mean, I wouldn't see the Mets go the lengths of giving up a Ryan Clifford for a Merrill Kelly type. It's an interesting deal, but I'm not sure how the Arizona Diamondbacks would benefit in that situation, outside of obviously getting a high upside slugger there in the farm and Ryan Clifford, who has really impressed the Mets since they've acquired him in the trade for Justin Verlander a year and a half ago now, back in the 2023 trade deadline. Fast forward to present, I would be surprised if the Mets acquired a veteran like Merrill Kelly, more so because I just don't see why the Diamondbacks would go out of their way to trade him for a piece such as that. I like Merrill Kelly. He's a veteran that still gets a job done. Would be a perfect replacement right now for a guy like Frankie Montas, but the reason why I don't see it happening has a lot more to do with the Diamondbacks still in a win-now stage and not in as much of a need like the Padres to still shed payroll, if that makes sense, as they just extended Perdomo to a 4 or 5 year extension, $45+ million we saw there. So congratulations to those select few Diamondbacks fans. But all right, guys, now let's get into this one, and let's start with Dylan Cease, because as many of you guys saw earlier today, there was an article, and it was honestly perfect timing, and we all saw the initial news here. As you guys can see, Frankie Montas is out 6 to 8 weeks, sadly, which is thanks to a high-grade lat strain, and because of that reason, the Mets are not going to have Frankie back until probably early sometime in June. Just for context, this is the David Pearson situation. David Pearson was rehabbing from a hip surgery in the 2023 offseason, entering 2024, which is why he missed pretty much the first half of the year. But once he returned to the Mets in June of that year, he was awesome. Hopefully the Mets get some dominance, or at least some quality starts from Frankie when he eventually returns to this Mets team. But after having some solid bullpens begin spring training, he's out of here, and he's on the shelf for a number of months. So how are the Mets going to fill this void? It's a great question, right? That's one that a lot of people have been pondering, and so has John Heyman of the New York Post, and he came out with a piece today which really reiterates what I was fully intending to talk about with each and every one of you tonight. Headline with the news that, yes, now that Frankie's out, what is the best move for the Mets, folks? Well, Jose Quintana might just be the most obvious pivot for them to go down, but the man who would be the best fit for them, even though he will be the most costly, is without question Dylan Cease. So we're going to beat both these drums here, and I want to hear from you Mets fans between Dylan Cease, Jose Quintana, and then we will get into the internal options as well. Which one do you think is the most likely scenario to happen for this Mets team? And secondly, which one do you most like to see and most hope to see happen? Maybe not most likely, but what you are at least hoping as a Mets fan to transpire at some point before the regular season. Alrighty, guys, let's get into this because as John goes on to break down, obviously he knows that the Mets, like other teams, have hurdles in trying to acquire Dylan Cease. But let's just talk about all the pros and as to why the Mets should be continuing to beat this drum. Just over this past week, it's been reaffirmed that the Mets have been continued as a consistent suitor in the Dylan Cease sweepstakes. And it's for obvious reasons. When you look at how masterful of a starter Dylan Cease is, one of the best, if not the best trade chip that one could acquire, especially out of the National League right now, when evaluating starters. Dylan Cease is coming off of a tremendous season there with the San Diego Padres, and what he would provide the Mets would easily be some of the best starter production, if not the best starter production, that they could get out of any of their eligible starters this regular season. And this is one of those things that, guys, we were talking about long before we found out that Frankie went down with injury. I mean, if anything, this just ups the ante, in my opinion, to bring in a guy like Dylan Cease, because he absolutely fits the mold for this Mets team. And I know that you got Mets fans out there that are like, listen, Wardy, I'm all for being optimistic. I'm all for wanting a great piece like Dylan Cease, but I don't want to give up the farm. I don't want to give up the Acuñas. I don't want to even consider one of the Sproats, the McLeans, or the tons of the pitching prospects for a rental, because it's a rental. Why go out of my way to trade for a rental when I could either go for a guy that's going to have control? That would make more sense to give up pieces. Well, here's the problem. There's very little options out there in the trade market for controllable starters that you could acquire, you know, that you're not giving up a complete farm for. Because here's the thing, the Mets tried to land Garrett Crochet earlier this offseason before the Cy Young candidate was acquired by the Red Sox. That was all thanks to the Red Sox having one of the best farms in the game, and the Mets not having enough of comfortability in giving up the entire farm for a starter, even with control. So a guy's a rental. Obviously, if you bring in a guy like Dylan Cease, you're doing it in hopes that you can extend the man. Otherwise, you're putting a lot of risk into someone who, yes, he impacts your team now. Yes, he helps you with your World Series aspirations greatly going up against the Braves. Mind you, Cease grew up a diehard Braves fan, so it'd be all the better to have him on our side versus him potentially being acquired by a Braves team that has been on record heavily pursuing Cease via trade over the past 2.5 years. I don't want Alex Anthopoulos to get his hands on him, so if it ain't going to be him, hopefully it can be this Mets team. And the way it can be for this Mets team is if we reach at least a little bit in the middle on the asking price. And I think this is going to obviously going to go in hand with what is happening with ownership of these same Padres. Because as John Heyman went over to note, and as many others have too, the whole reason as to why the Padres had to sign Nick Pivetta with a base salary of $1 million and a total of 4, but 4 years with multiple player opt-outs, is because they know they have to stretch those contracts thin over a long period of time versus having it bloated on a 1 or 2 year deal because they got no money to spend. That's just the reality of it. Given Peter Seidler's passing, given the 91-page lawsuit from Seidler's widowed wife with his biological brothers then in said lawsuit, it's a really messy situation right now there. They don't have a TV deal. They don't have dollars. So if it comes down to, hey, we could try to shed north of $14 million and get a good return for a rental that we're not going to re-sign after the year, let's go out of our way and do exactly that. Now, I know some Mets fans have been on the side of, I like Michael Cain more. He fits the mold. He's a New York guy, former New York Yankee, would rekindle that relationship with Desi Druskull, would rekindle it with Carlos Mendoza, Clay Holmes, you name it. Could help Clay Holmes continue to stretch as a starter now. All reasons that I agree with wholeheartedly, but given that he signed a lesser 2025 contract, a 2026 mutual option as well, was telling that he was helping AJ Preller and the Padres out with their limited spending to make sure that they can have some flexibility to make that type of move for Nick Pivetta, even if it does in fact mean that they're going to still trade a guy like Dylan Cease. Adding Pivetta makes Cease more expendable than ever. But you can still obviously argue going into the season with a fully healthy, locked and loaded rotation, that being Preller and the Padres. Because it's hard to sell to AJ Preller on the idea of giving away a key piece of the team while still being in this win now stage. But push comes to shove at some point when you have such limited spending that you're working with. The Padres' dollars are night and day from what they were during Peter Seidler's time as owner, and obviously he had a heavy emphasis in trying to spend a lot in a short period of time because he knew he wasn't going to be here too long, sadly. And I'm just grateful that I got a chance to hit Petco Park while Seidler was still with us there in the 2023 season. That's something that I will always appreciate as a baseball fan. But now that we have seen this happen with the Padres and their limited spending, this is the true avenue for the Mets. And we know the Padres love Luis Angel Acuña. They like Brandon Sproat a lot. They like Nolan McLean. They like Jonathan. They want pretty much 3 top 25 prospects. But if you could bring in one of those starters, but maybe to a lesser degree now, because now that you have Montas hurt, do you really want to trade any starting pitching depth away? I can see why the Mets would be reluctant there, but still, if you're going to acquire a guy for the sake of not wanting to have one of the Griffin Cannons, the Tyler McGills, or the Paul Blackburns in this rotation, then you might as well consider trading one of those pieces, so that way at least the Padres are getting a rotation filler back, as well as some prospect capital. You would have to hope that you wouldn't have to trade a Brandon Sproat. Luis Angel Acuna is a guy that no one wants to see leave Queens right now, but I understand that there is this divide with Mets fans, including John Heyman, who noted in his article how he would drive the prospects himself there without question to the airport. And it's funny enough, I would do the same because of how much I like Dylan Cease. So this is more my pre-existing bias with Cease going back to the White Sox the past 2.5 years when I really started to follow him there. Cease is one of these guys that is just unbelievably dynamic. Not only a fastball that sits 97 to 100, but a breaking ball that can be oh so deadly. A nice slide piece too. You got a nice 5-6 pitch mix with Cease, who knows what it takes to pitch in big games as well down the stretch, whether it's postseason, whether it's regular season. Dylan Cease can be that guy for you. I mean, a strikeout machine, 220 plus Ks and just under 200 innings for the Padres this past season, was the veteran right-hander, and making north of $14 million this past season. That's what the Mets can eat. Try to negotiate an extension and go from there. Is it a slam dunk to happen? No. And is it very fitting that's yet another spring training that I talked to you guys right around mid-February, how we have these proposed trade ideas for a Luis Castillo. Remember a couple years ago, the Tyler Mahleys, the Chris Paddocks. Remember those guys? Chris Paddock, Tyler Mahle, before everything went to kaput with them and their injuries, respectively, both with the Twins, funny enough. And then you look at guys like Barmy as well, to fast forward to now, Luis Castillo we talked about for the past number of years, yet it still hasn't happened because the Mariners are always stubborn. They don't want to spend and they don't want to trade. The Mariners just want to stay put being the Mariners, and that's fine. Continue to be mediocre. That's how it's going to be Seattle. When you look at some other teams, there's been rumblings on the Pablo Lopez's, among others, for Minnesota, but that you have to see it to believe it then, because they're in a win-now stage with limited spending, and they would like to keep some of those guys to a degree. So when you look at the trade market, there really isn't too much out there at the moment that I think is overly appealing to David Stearns, which is exactly why John Heyman did reiterate over the past week that the Mets have been one of the most consistent suitors trying to pursue and land Dylan Cease's services from San Diego. Easier said than done trying to pry away an ace-caliber starter from a team in a win-now stage, still pushing for a playoff spot like the Mets versus the Padres. Again, these are two teams that could both be competing for a wild card spot if the Mets don't win the division at the end. Say the Braves win, or say the Phillies go on a run that very little of us are expecting right now. They have the rotation to make it happen, but their offense, in my opinion, is going to be very Jekyll and Hyde throughout the course of the season. Lo and behold, we have now reached the point, everybody, that it's either Dylan Cease via trade, or it's probably not going to be a trade at all at this point in time. So my question to each and every one of you is, are you for or against Dylan Cease being the proper route the Mets go down, versus either going for something of lesser value, but also maybe a better fit for the Mets now because you don't have to give up anything in Jose Quintana that will pivot into in just a couple minutes. Internal options like the McGills, like the Cannings, like the Blackburns, like the rookie and Brandon Sproat with a great spring training paired along with it. Otherwise, it's still hard to sell me on that because I need Sproat to make sure that he's not rushed too fast where it hurts his development. You know, we saw him kind of have to handle the big lights, the big stage after a rough number of outings to begin his AAA career towards the end of the 2024 minor league season for him. But I have a lot of optimism and faith in Sproat and what he can provide, but there's still question marks as to what we'll be getting from him. So that's why this spring training is important, to see exactly how he looks in the early goings, if he's going to fully be competing for a rotation spot. But out of everybody, guys, out of Cease and out of everything else I just described, I would love to hear your thoughts. So let's see it. Get Kyle Finnegan. That would be a bullpen piece for sure. Don't see the Mets doing that at this point in time, but I will say there's definitely still bullpen pieces out there that are beyond appealing for not only the Mets, but myself as a fan. And it starts with David and last name Robertson. I think a lot of people can agree there. I agree with you, Cannoli. If anyone is advocating for those two starters, you are clearly clueless. 100%. You're not paying attention then. And that goes for anyone. And I see some of them in the chat, sadly, that just don't get it still. Sproat is untouchable. I agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think Brandon Sproat's absolutely an untouchable prospect for this Mets team. I want to know if you guys feel the same or different. Don't trade the farm for Cease, but you can't prospect hug either. I agree, and that's where it's a tricky, because it's not like the Mets have an abundance of options in the trade market for a starter right now. If they did, then I say, okay, you know what, maybe don't trade for Cease, given the fact that he's a rental and you have to give up a premier price to land someone like him. But given the circumstances that the Mets find themselves in, again, it's eerily similar to the circumstances that we've dealt with in previous beginnings of the year in spring training, where it's a guy that we have to deal with is now down with injury in the rotation for the first half of the year, if not the entire year. So how do we replace that? Because I'm sorry, Mets fans, and I understand that the Mets can go out there and do it, and I won't be shocked if they do it. That would be a very David Stearns thing. But there's something about Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill being my number 5 and number 6 starter right now that just doesn't sit right with me. Because it's one thing to have your number 6 starter be the battle of Canning, McGill, and Blackburn. That I'm absolutely on board with. Your 6th starter is a guy that could easily be, maybe a fringe 4 even on some lesser rotations in baseball. Whereas the Mets, it's just for them to crack the 6. But now, with Griffin Canning, almost a sure lock to be your number 5 starter, barring changes right now, when he gave up more bombs than anyone else in the American League last year. I know he's going to make adjustments. I know he's going to get rid of that fastball, or at least change the pitch shape of it with Mets assistant pitching coach and Desi Drewskill. But seriously, to have him as a lock, to have Clay Holmes as your number 4 right now, when I have a lot of optimism in Clay Holmes, but let's also be realistic in saying that he needs to go out there and prove it. This is eerily similar to the start of last year, with the main difference being Kodai Senga's health. So God willing, knock on wood, if Kodai Senga can at least stay healthy, then your top 3 of the order will be Kodai Senga, David Pearson, Sean Manaea, and any order that you want to go about. But then your next 3 is filled with more question marks. What with the Clay Holmeses, with the Griffin Cannings, with the Tyler McGills. And that right there is something, while yes, do I think most of you Mets fans, I think we could all agree, can the Mets get through the first half of the season with that quality depth of starters? Yes, they can. They did it last year. They can do it again. There's no doubt in my mind that they can do it again. But do we want them to do it again? Do we want them to put themselves in a position where they're putting themselves at that much risk? Do we want the Mets to do that versus going after and landing more of a surefire guaranteed thing? I personally want them to add more. I'm always the fan that's interested in adding more. Kind of goes in hand with the fact that we do content so consistently and covering what the Mets could, or maybe, at least are considering to do in the trade or free agent front. And if it isn't going to be a guy like Dylan Cease, who I will continue to beat that drum, as the Mets have continued to, until proven otherwise, until he's either dealt somewhere else or until it's just abundantly clear that the Mets are not acquiring him any earlier than the trade deadline this year. If it isn't going to be Cease, then let's talk about the man and Mr. Jose Quintana. Jose Quintana is an interesting option for this Mets team, because if we're being honest, Jose Quintana had a god-awful first half last year. Not a good at all first half. Jose Quintana was Swiss cheese. He was just not at all what you were hoping to see. I just realized I'm pulling up the wrong highlights for a second. I apologize. I got Jose Iglesias highlights running over here, but I want my guy Q. Where's Q? Okay. Let's talk about Q for a second, because Jose Quintana would absolutely be a fit right now. I think he's probably the obvious alternative fit now that you have a key rotation starter down with injury. And you look at Quintana's numbers this past season. Funny enough, in the first half, Quintana really labored. I think of that start against the Tampa Bay Rays in particular, where Quintana couldn't even get out of like an inning without giving up like 7+ earned runs. Brett Beatty hit like 1 or 2 home runs that game, and we only lost by a run or so. It was so frustrating. What a horrendous series that was. Kristen Scott as well, made his MLB debut in that series too, but the Mets still didn't. I don't think they won a single game. I think we might have got swept. It was just really bad, I think, in the month of May last year for the Mets, when things were still doom and gloom. But Jose Quintana, as we got to the second half of the year especially, really hankered down for this Mets team. And just like every other starter, had his stretch of brilliance where he was giving the Mets 6 quality innings of 3 or less earned run ball. Even down the stretch heading into postseason as well, Jose Quintana was a guy that we were able to rely on. And when you guys look at Jose Quintana, even with a fastball that we understand, it's 90, very low 90s. We know that he's your off-speed breaking pitch guy. But if you had to pick between Jose Quintana and Tyler McGill or Paul Blackburn right now, and Paul Blackburn should hopefully be good for opening day, but he's slightly behind because he's still coming back from the spinal fluid leak there in his back, which is just a crazy thing to say. Griffin Canning, I'm going to assume, is kind of the lock there in the rotation. So do you want Jose Quintana? Do you want Tyler McGill? Do you want Paul Blackburn? I would probably take Jose Quintana because, listen, what's his market right now? He's still out there. He's entering his age 36 season or so, and he would be utilized in whatever situation the Mets want to put him in. You could bring Jose Quintana back on a one-year deal. Obviously, you're going to sign him for under $10 million. It isn't going to cost him too much. And before you know it, he's going to give you the innings at least that you need to be eaten up until Frankie Montas is ready and returning to this Mets rotation, likely sometime in the month of June. I think that's a more than fine alternative. Is this the preferred one for me? No, I want Dylan Cease. That goes without saying. I wanted Dylan Cease prior to the injury happening. So this only, ups the ante for me, as well as a lot of other Mets fans out there. But I definitely do think that in the case of Jose Quintana, what he provided this Mets team right now, it's the best fit of the current lesser options. If you're not going for that big splash in a trade, I think that this is the best surefire guaranteed as the next man up option. I don't think that there are many options out there right now that are going to fit the mold better than Jose Quintana, because it also goes in hand with the obvious fact that, okay, Jose Quintana just was here the past couple years. He's been pretty reliable. Yes, we know that he's fluctuated at times, but he's a guy that for what he is, for what he would be slotted as your number 5 starter. So for context, the Mets rotation would be Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, David Pearson, Clay Holmes, Jose Quintana, your 1 through 5. That's eerily similar to last year, with higher upside, you can definitely argue, with Kodai Senga and Clay Holmes in the fold versus having Luis Severino and the other aspects of, the Tyler McGill starts, etc. And then your number 6 starter can be that true battle again of the Paul Blackburns, the Griffin Cannings, the Tyler McGills. That's a route I'm comfortable with personally, and I want to know if you guys are in favor of that or against, because I understand both sides of the coin here. I understand some people saying don't even spend on Quintana, just stay in-house. You have your in-house options. But here's my problem as well. The Mets are one more injury away. They are just one more starter injury away from Clay Holmes being their number 3 starter, right? When he was this setup, former closer turned setup man or so for the Yankees. I'm not comfortable with that, right? And if you're going to realize that you're not going to have a starter back until earliest June, the least you could do is, if you're the Mets, if you're David Stearns, is to add another piece of quantity. And if you can add some quality in there too, with a Cease upside, no one's complaining. But am I going to lose sleep overnight if we land Jose Quintana? No. I will be more than comfortable. I'll sleep like a baby and say, okay, this is what we're riding with. Then when Frankie does return, then your rotation 1 through 6 then can be with Jose Quintana as your 6th starter, or Montas as your 6th starter, depending on his ramp up, him coming back, and how everything looks. That I'd be more than happy with as a fan. So definitely would love to hear from you guys as well. Haram with the $5 donation. Thank you so much for that. Haram says, the Mets have a lot of days off in the first 2 months. We don't need a 6th starter in the beginning of the season. McGill will be fine. I know you say we don't need, but the Mets have an emphasis on having it that way because of Kodai Senga. They want things to stay that way for a reason. So do not be surprised if the Mets fully expect to go locked and loaded with a 6-man rotation to begin the 2025 season. Let's see. Just checking the comments right now, everybody. We will continue talking about Jose Quintana and other options here shortly. If you guys haven't already, continue to smash that like and subscribe button as your first time in, as we're breaking down all the latest news and rumors in Metsland. Headlined by Frankie Montas out for multiple months due to injury. So we're breaking down the potential pivot options for the Mets, or at least alternative options to consider, like Dylan Cease, like Jose Quintana, internally Canning, McGill, Blackburn, Sproat, that we're going to touch on here shortly, before then getting into Jose Iglesias, Starling Marte, Pete Alonso, Juan Soto, and all the fun topics in Port St. Lucie before we wrap up this live segment here, late night, February 17th. Haram, thank you again for that donation. I really appreciate that. We need both Wardy Cease. I don't disagree with you, Barry. I don't, but here's the thing. We'll be lucky to land one, it appears, at this rate. So bearing that in mind, knowing that, beggars can't be choosers type thing, I will just be more than happy if we can just land a starter. That's what I want. Favorite replacement, let's go in tiers, right? Favorite replacement is Cease. most likely, in my opinion, truthfully, most likely, I think is Jose Quintana. I'm just going to flat out say, I think Jose Quintana is a greater likelihood than Tyler McGill or Paul Blackburn. One of those two. And the reason why I say that is, why the hell would David Stearns be going out of his way to be trying to trade for Dylan Cease? Why would he be in the Dylan Cease trade market as much as he's been with a Frankie Montas healthy, but then not want to add a starter after Frankie Montas goes down with injury? And you have a veteran that the team knows really, really well that was just with us last year in a deep run, just chilling at home waiting for the call. I'm sure he still has his place, if he has a place in Port St. Lucie. I'm sure Jose Quintana's got a place in Florida. He's got to have a place in Florida, right? He's got to. So, with that being said, I think, truthfully, best is Cease, most realistic is Quintana, and then you just have internal from there. I don't think the internal options are the most likely. Maybe that's silly of me to say, but there's just something about Jose Quintana not even really being talked about at all this offseason until this point. And I did say to you guys literally 2 months ago that don't be surprised if the Mets circle back on Quintana if injuries happen come spring training, because that's when more signings will happen. His injuries inevitably happen, we know this, and that's why Carlos Mendoza said, that you never know what happens on the injury front. And little did we know that he was alluding to Frankie Montas. He said this 2 days ago. 2 days ago, he said this to the media. So clearly he's known things for I don't know exactly how long, but this is another year where the Mets are in need of another arm. So that's where I think Jose Quintana at least fits the mold. Did I hear what Michael Kay had to say about Alonso's contract? I did, and I'm not really going to acknowledge it much because I don't need to acknowledge a lesser opinion, especially one that comes from an opposing fan base that I certainly don't care the opinion of. So that's all I have to say on that front. I'll focus on what Mets fans actually want to hear and not nonsense for people that they don't even care to hear it from, i.e. Michael Kay. So now, guys, let's pivot into talking more on if it ain't going to be Jose Quintana, right? And if it ain't going to be a Tyler McGill, a Griffin Canning, a Paul Blackburn, then there's one more route the Mets can go down. There is one more drum the Mets can at least consider to beat. And that's Brandon Sproat, guys. That's Brandon Sproat. And that's at least in the internal options, because there is one external option, actually. You know what? I'm going to correct myself real quick. I apologize, because I cheated. I showed you this, so I might as well start with this. There is one other pitcher out there, not named Jose Quintana in the free agent market, that does entice me to a certain extent. This man threw a no-hitter back in 2022 before going down then with, I believe, Tommy John. And that is Spencer Turnbull, formerly of the Detroit Tigers, most recently of the Philadelphia Phillies. And as both a starter and a reliever, separate from his injuries, Spencer Turnbull was a very solid acquisition for the Philadelphia Phillies this past year. Utilized in various situations in multi-inning relief as well as starter roles, he was able to get the job done. Turnbull, veteran, would be able to give you those innings eaten, and honestly gives you a pretty interesting mix of pitches that you'd be working with. As you guys can see here from his Baseball Savant page, he is in the 97th percentile in breaking run value this past year, 79th in pitching run value, 32nd in fastball run value, 66th in off-speed run value, right around the league average in expected ERA, expected batting average above league average in the 64th percentile. Fastball velocity is low, but he's still averaging more than Jose Quintana by at least a couple miles per hour. Then you look at the 76th percentile in average exit velocity, so thankfully he doesn't give up too much of the hard exit velo. Chase percentage, 14%, so he doesn't get a lot of guys at chase, but he does get the whip percentage right around league average at 49%. K percentage well above league average at 73%. Walk percentage a little below league average in the 34th percentile. 61st percentile here in barrel percentage. Hard hit percentage, they're in the 18th percentile. So actually, he did get hard hit quite a bit when he did get hit, but he didn't give up too much average exit velocity, sitting right around 88 miles per hour. Ground ball percentage, well above league average in the almost 80th percentile. And that's Spencer Turnbull for this past season. Again, a veteran at the age of 32, entering his age 33 season. Turnbull is one of these guys that's pretty much kind of this Swiss Army knife, an upgraded option over Griffin Canning. If you want to look at him as like a swingman type fit, that is where Spencer Turnbull does make a level of sense. Because this past season, at 54 innings, 9.6 K per nine, to a 3.3 walks per nine, a sub-1 home run per nine, for the Phillies, a 2.65 ERA, a 4 expected ERA. So had some, lady luck on his side with the Phillies this past year, but overall solid campaign. Turnbull hasn't pitched beyond 56 innings since the 2019 season. He has really been a guy that we saw, and pardon me, 2022, I was mistaken. I'm trying to think, was it 2021 must have been the year that he had the no-hitter, and that's when the year started with a lot of no-hitters, at an alarming rate with the balls, kind of, what were they? Not flattened, but they were like deflated a little bit, like they were just dead baseballs after being juiced up until post-2019 area. But Turnbull, a veteran option that the Mets can consider. Whether or not they will has yet to be seen. There has been no reported connections with Spencer. I'm just throwing him out there because out of the limited options, you got guys like Andrew Heaney too, but I'm really just not sure on what the Mets would have an interest in a guy like Andrew Heaney. I think this makes, honestly, a little bit more sense for them. You guys let me know how you feel about it, though. Again, I just want something to upgrade the rotation. It doesn't need to be anything overly sexy. It just needs to get the job done. And Spencer does have a 6-pitch mix, which I'm sure the Mets wouldn't hate the idea of working with. A lot of fun there. 4-seam, sweeper, sinker, curve, change, slider. That's what happens when you go from being a starter and a reliever. You got all these different fun pitches to work with. So hopefully Spencer, if he does land with the Mets, not complaining, that'll be the replacement. And if he goes elsewhere, then wish him well, as long as he doesn't go to a rival. Now, folks, going from talking about Spencer Turnbull, let's go to talking about what I initially meant to say a couple minutes ago, which is our guy, the youngin himself, and Brandon Sproat. Many of you guys know Brandon Sproat, but in case you don't, in case you haven't been paying attention to the Mets farm, that's okay. Let Wardy enlighten you just a little bit here. Brandon Sproat absolutely skyrocketed through the minor leagues this past year, from single A all the way up to triple A. And what was most notable about Sproat was his poise, was really his composure for a guy that sits, again, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101 on the gun in Brandon Sproat. The guy's an absolute flamethrower. He has a really, really good, already solid-looking changeup. You got the slide piece as well. You got a nice mix for Brandon Sproat, who does, I will say, need to work a little bit more on the shape of his fastball, which is what a guy like Desi Drewskill will be able to do and get the best out of someone like him. Mets a new assistant pitching coach coming over from the Yankees this past year. But Sproat was a guy that just dominated so much, whether he was in Port St. Lucie, whether he was in Brooklyn, whether he was in Binghamton. And then once he got up to Syracuse, that's where he met his demise. And Brandon Sproat, for the first time in his young professional career, had an uphill battle that we saw in the Mets minor leagues, and that was there in AAA. Was giving up some hard contact early that we saw in his first couple starts, was just trying to get adjusted, was handing his pitches plenty, especially the slide piece, and that really went in hand with what he said reportedly through the media over the past couple days, because of, just handling the pressure, the expectations of really like, wow, this is kind of a bigger field moment. This is a greater stage at the AAA level. So Sproat, obviously having learning to do and adjustments to do, and mind you, there's no better time to make these adjustments than by time you just get things started at the AAA level. But now Sproat has dominated so much in such a short period of time in the Mets minor leagues that we were having this great discussion on, okay, if he has a dominant spring training, the Mets gotta at least consider bringing this guy in to be in this rotation, because that's how good he is. The stuff plays. Brandon Sproat can strike out a lot of major league players right here, right now. But the reason why the Mets are not going to just absolutely chomp at the bit to bring him in with certainty is because they do not want to they don't want to hurt the development of someone with this much upside. They know how much is at risk here with someone of Brandon Sproat's potential, and they know how much they can gain with someone like him if they play their cards right. The Mets even consider, to a degree, Brandon Sproat late last year. At least the fans, including myself, considered it. And Sproat said publicly that he wasn't opposed to being called up by the Mets as a reliever if it meant that he would get the call, as soon as possible. That's all he wanted. And I respect the man for, going out of his way to say, hey, I will absolutely do this for you guys if you ask me to do it. It's not something that I will say no to. It's just one of those things where I want to get to the bigs as soon as humanly possible. So commend Brandon Sproat for being the ultimate team player. Marcus Stroman, take notes if and I know there's a lot of different context there. including the option he has in his contract for the year, which incentivizes him to start again. I know that story. Just want to slip that in there because I always find it funny. But going back into Brandon Sproat, a guy who went over 100 innings this past season, posted a little bit over a 3 ERA, a very strong K per 9 to walk per 9 ratio there, very much in what you're looking for, and a guy that can come in right away and give you some plus stuff, and hopefully be a guy that has the next ace level caliber stuff for this Mets rotation. Sproat's only 22, 23 years of age, so that's the most exciting part. You know that this is a guy that has potential to be dominant in your rotation for the next 5 to 10 years. But knowing that you have him for the next 5 to 10 years is exactly why you can't rush things. This is exactly why you have to be smart with someone like Brandon, okay? And that's where I think for the Mets here, it's in their best interest to see what he has in spring training. Hopefully he dominates and lights up the lamp so well that we're like, we cannot send this kid down. He's just too good. And then bam, he takes the league by storm right then and there. But if it does happen, that's okay too. And no fan should be overreacting if Brandon Sproat is maybe even a somewhat early send down to AAA Syracuse, because that just shows you all you need to know. The Mets want him to get more reps in and get more comfortability at AAA, work on his pitch mix a bit more before they inevitably give him a call at some point this season. It feels inevitable that the Mets are going to give Brandon Sproat the call this year. It's just a matter of when. Before, it felt like it was going to happen a little bit before, maybe around the trade deadline, maybe a little bit before. Now there's a greater reality and a greater possibility of him being called on now than what was the case just a couple days ago before Montas' injury was leaked out publicly. So Brandon Sproat, another option for the Mets to consider out of an abundance of options. And I would love to hear your guys' continued thoughts in the chat down below, in the comments down below to my replay viewers. What starter out of all of them that we broke down today do you think is the best replacement for losing Frankie Montas for the first half at minimum of the 2025 season? Now, guys, let's get back into talking about more here on our guy and star-studded Starling Marte, Jose Iglesias, a little bit on Alonso and Soto, some key takeaways from their Port St. Lucie thus far, and then we will wrap up the show.
Expect that this is over, or is there a chance, do you think, that you might still be traded this spring?
¿Tú piensas como que ya nada va a pasar? ¿Tú piensas que es una posibilidad que todavía te pueden cambiar?
Bueno, no sé, solamente saben la gerencia y lo que sea, y me imagino que sea lo que pase, o está aquí. Si no, estaré compitiendo cada día en donde quiera que vaya y como sea posible. Pero estoy aquí haciendo lo mejor cada día y ayudando a los muchachos jóvenes y hablando cosas bonitas y cosas bien para que se sientan más cómodos.
Yeah, I don't know. That's at the end of the day, that's something that's out of my control. That's in the control of the front office. But in the meantime, I'm here. I'm going to continue to work hard as hard as I possibly can. I'm going to come out there and compete. I'm going to try to give the young guys good advice. I'm going to try to be a positive impact in this clubhouse in whatever way. At the end of the day, I have no control over what happens, whether it's a trade or not.
One thing that was made abundantly clear to Starling Marte, which he said he appreciated, was how transparent the Mets were about this entire process. The Mets let Starling Marte know that before acquiring Juan Soto, and even after acquiring Juan Soto, that they were always intending on at least trying to trade him this offseason. As something that may still happen as we now reach the early goings of spring training, and the Mets find a suitor that's willing to take on Marte's final year, and they eat the good portion of his contract. In return, the Mets maybe get an arm that can be notable to them. And if the Mets are going to go down a route of creativity, I will just throw this out there. It's been beaten a little bit, and we'll talk about more on the platform. We've had some fans propose this in the past. But if there's one starter out there that could make sense for the Mets, where his contract isn't ideal, but it's just for the 1 year, so if you could take the hit, you might as well take it. Jordan Montgomery and Starling Marte could be a swap that would make a level of sense for both sides. All I will say, though, is that I would imagine that goes in hand with someone internally for the Mets kind of breaking out to being more in that DH role. So Winker, isn't batting against lefties too much too, where he's going to be laboring quite a bit, where it makes more sense. Because right now, the DH platoon for the Mets is the best DH platoon they've had since the Universal DH was put in place. Marte and Winker is night and day from Dom Smith and JD Davis. Night and day from guys like Mr. Darren Ruff Daniel Vogelback and the little spurts of Tyler Naquin if he wasn't playing in the outfield. A lot's changed. One of the commonalities is that pretty much all those guys I just listed are either no longer Major League Baseball or are on maximum minor league contracts. Not the case with Marte, who isn't getting any younger, in his later 30s now, and is on an inflated contract that he's not deserving of right now. Marte has no reason to complain about the circumstances, and give credit to the Mets for being as transparent as they were, and for him to say, hey, I'll be the leader to the young kids here. I'll help share advice and do everything I need to do in this limited role. Whatever the Mets ask of me, I'll be there and do that for them. And I appreciate that from Marte as well, because we haven't gotten to know too much about Starling Marte's personality since he's arrived with the Mets. He's been a very much an introverted player versus a lot of the more extroverted guys in this clubhouse. But for him to kind of go out of his way to exemplify, hey, I'm fine with whatever role, the selflessness, eerily similar to Jesse Winker, among others with this Mets team. And that's the kind of mentality that at least you're hoping for at this point in time. So, does it guarantee that Marte is going to be staying put? No. But do I think there's something to be said about being a team player and not being a schmuck like maybe someone else across town on you being utilized a certain way, and how is it going to fare for you? Marte knows where things stand for not only this point in his career, but what the construction of the Mets are. And, I think after landing Juan Soto, he's like, listen, I get it. Like, if I'm you guys, I would have done the exact same thing. So we'll see what happens with Starling Marte. But if the Jordan Montgomery swap doesn't happen with the Diamondbacks, Montgomery's coming off of a really wishy-washy year in Arizona after not having spring training and signing late thanks to Scott Boras. But Monty knows what it takes to win in New York. Will to rekindle his relationship with a guy like Desi Drewschool. They know each other to a degree. Same thing with Clay Holmes. Same thing with Carlos Mendoza. The guy knows what it takes to pitch in big stages in New York and high leverage. He's won it all. He's just, if we just exclude what was a wash of a World Series hanging over a year and starting the year late in Montgomery, I think Monty would honestly be a perfectly fine fit for this Mets team. But it makes a lot more sense if you went down that route, if it was kind of a swap for the contracts a bit there, and Marte going to Arizona, where he had a little bit of stint with Cattell, a very short stint Starling Marte had in Arizona a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And for the Mets, they bring in Jordan Montgomery, who would rekindle these relationships. Being back in the New York market, I think would bode him well too. And then you go from there and see what he can provide for you throughout the course of the 162. And who knows, maybe he can even provide more for you than what you'd get from a guy like Frankie Montas at times. So not saying that that is something that I expect the Mets to go down, but if you want to think of something creative that lumps in a guy like Marte while helping the Mets to acquire a starter that fits the need for a starter right now, I think that's probably one of the better ones to make that happen. If that makes sense. You guys let me know how you guys feel about that. What is happening in the chat that you guys are giggling about? Hold on, let me go up in the chat just for 1 sec because I'm seeing some back and forth here. Oh, there's back and forth going on. All right, play nice, children. Come on. It's almost 10 p.m. Eastern. I know it's bedtime for most of you. I'm not going to take too much longer, I promise. We'll get out of here shortly. But before we get on to wrapping things up, everybody, I did just want to share a little bit more on the latest with Jose Iglesias. Because as many of you guys know, Jose Iglesias pleaded not too long ago on wanting to return to this Mets team. And, for a lot of obvious reasons. And he spoke to John Heyman and was very blunt in his remarks in doing so. And we went over a lot of the Pete Alonso stuff, which is why I'm not going over too much of it because we just went over that in a video earlier today. Juan Soto. Look at that sexy man. My goodness gracious. And I don't care if you guys are going to see pause or what. Look at this beast. He was always meant to be in these colors. And the shades to match perfectly with the Mr. Met shades hat is chef's kiss. Look at these. We are witnessing over 80 home runs between the two here, guys. Absolute electric. But let me get to Jose Iglesias here. This guy just from a couple days ago. Thanks to our guy and John Heyman, because John was the first to report on it. Let's go down here just a minute, everybody. There's also another piece from John Heyman talking about how, Juan Soto still can't really believe it that he's under the $765 million deal. Kevin Parada is looking like he's in the best shape of his life. Mets draft bust pick, thanks to Billy Epler a couple years ago. A bat-first catcher who's been both a negative defensive and offensive player for the majority of his minor league career. Parada did have some bounce backs last year, so hopefully he can build off of that, because this is pretty much a put up or shut up year for Kevin Parada and the Mets organization if he's going to get anywhere at this point. Big year for him, and he cut over 15 pounds by dropping, just some bad diet out of his diet, which is a smart thing for Kevin. So I'm happy to see that, Kevin. I'm wishing you the best of luck this spring training. But I do want to go here to Jose Iglesias because I know I have this article not too far. But the problem is when we have all these comments, Lindor and everyone else, it honestly might take a little bit to get here. So I apologize for that, everybody. Just give me one more second. Here we go. So here was the initial article from, on Jose Quintana. Not Jose Quintana. I keep getting tongue-tied. On Mr. Canelita, Jose Iglesias. And it goes on to state the following, everybody. It hurts because we started something that definitely isn't finished yet. It took a lot of us to get where we got. That's what hurts. I definitely get it that it's a business, but it definitely hurts. It's a special relationship and culture with the organization, the players, and fans. John notes that Iglesias would sometimes refer to the Mets as we before having to correct himself. And Iglesias did note that until he signs with a different team, anything can happen, right? And we did hear from Johnny, who has been doing the play-by-play for the Mets over Spanish radio for a number of years. Funny enough, I'm just not saying his last name because I know I'm going to butcher it. He reported a couple days ago, towards the end of this past week, that the Mets will be meeting with Iglesias this weekend or this Monday. Now, all we've heard is that John Heyman met with Iglesias, so maybe that was the information that was relayed to him and we're just not aware of it. But he did go on a comment on my tweet that I was going live today. So he's been following the content. He sees I've shot him out. So hopefully that Jose Iglesias meeting does in fact happen. I'd imagine that it will. And I will beat the same drum that I've beaten with Pete Alonso for, a number of weeks. That, until he signs elsewhere, like Jose Iglesias said it himself, I firmly believe this guy's going to return to Queens. And for the people that are saying, Wardy, there's no room on this Mets roster for Jose Iglesias, you're going to limit then your utility role. I understand the idea of not wanting to have a logjam where if injuries happen, you really can't send someone down like Iglesias because he has to be DFA'd and then he could be picked up through the waiver wire. I understand the reluctance there, but I also understand not having Nick Madrigal on this roster to begin the season. Why do I want that noodle bat? Even with his plus defense, I know he's 27, former top draft pick, minor league options, whoop-de-dad-do. Okay, great. The defense is cool, but for the Cubs to give up on him is telling to me. And secondly, Jose Iglesias did what for the Mets this past year? Be more valuable than even Pete Alonso with a 2.5 WAR to just a 2 WAR apiece? Yes, you heard that correctly. Jose Iglesias, I'm not saying he's going to put up these numbers again in 2025. He won't. If the Mets bring him back, he more than likely will not put up these splits. He will come back down to reality. He'll still be a high contact hitter. He'll still be batting in the 300s. But when it comes to the on base and especially the slugging, that'll probably go down to more in the 300s than the 400s. But the reason as to why this relationship needs to rekindle is not only is Iglesias putting on a silver platter that I want to return to you, Mets, but he's also made it clear that he's selfless. He'll be in whatever role. He'll literally do whatever you ask. He'll put the arm over the shoulder of Luis Angel Acuna, who will be a perfect veteran mentor for this team. JD Martinez was a heavy reason as to why Iglesias got called up last year, and he heavily emphasized the reason as to why Iglesias needed to be called up was to spark the clubhouse. He's a part of that culture movement, and the rest is history with the OMG vibes and everything in between. He knows that this is unfinished business, and he also knows that if he comes to the Mets, he is your backup shortstop option for Francisco Lindor, whose back is only going to probably get worse before it gets better. He's not getting any younger, Lindor, and we know he's an absolute workhorse every day. That might be something that flares up from time to time. If it is, you need a backup shortstop. Jose Iglesias is your best option there. Then you add in the veteran leadership. Then you add in coming off the bench in a limited role. If Iglesias gets a start at second base, cool. If he's off the bench for the entire week, cool. Whatever is best for the team is what I think Iglesias is down with. He just wants more of a dollar amount that I think is more realistic for him. And for the Mets, I understand them wanting, some flexibility in that position and also not wanting to commit too much for a guy that, they may have to cut after a period of time. There is that reality with a guy like him as much as they enjoy Jose Iglesias. So Mets fans, my question to each and every one of you is simply this. Do you want to see Canelita return to this Mets team? I want to see this man return to this Mets team. I think Jose Iglesias has done more than enough to return to this Mets team. Maybe I'm in the minority for saying that, but listen, all you have to do is not have Nick Madrigal start the year with this Mets team. Have him start his split contract in the minor leagues in AAA. Literally, it's all you got to do. It's right in front of us. It's as clear as day. So I don't really know what else I need to say here. I mean, roster spots are so easy to make happen when Nick Madrigal, Jared Young, and freaking Jose Azocar are guys taking up spots. It ain't going to move the needle for me because those are all guys that very well could not be, pardon me, very well might not be with this Mets team 2-3 weeks from now. It's pretty easy. Cuts happen. They happen every spring. Bring Candelita back. Enough of this nonsense. Until he signs somewhere else, I'm going to continue to say he needs to come back. Yeah, see, a lot of you guys are with me. A lot of you guys, understandably so. Now, you guys have been with me since the start, and I can't thank you enough for smashing the like and subscribe buttons. You guys have chimed in as we broke down all the latest in Mets land tonight, folks. And before we get out of here, I have one final thing that I'm going to share with each and every one of you. And that's just some really cool clips that we have seen in Port St. Lucie. And I have to give a huge shout out to both S&Y and the Mets official socials. Their photography crew, their videographers have done a tremendous job. Their editors as well. Everyone across the board. I don't know all of them individually, but to each and every one of them, whatever their names are, keep up the great work. Seriously, it has been very impressive to see. Just the little reels of clips that the Mets have posted has really been impressive. Even what we were showing you guys like to start today's show. The Mets every single day post a recap there on, Port St. Lucie, and just look at the video quality on this, guys. It's absolutely mint, like literally chef's kiss. And the blue pops so well with the orange on the hats too. They have the perfect type of shading going on. And these videos too with the lighting, they got everything going right. Marky V working the hot corner, baby. Francisco, Mr. Smile at short. You got Brett Beatty there getting some hot corner work as well. Okay, then we got our Mr. Smile again. Luis Angel Acuna making some turns. Pete Alonso making some turns there. Okay, working on those fly out catches is Juan Soto in the outfield. Little pop-ups is what Lindor's working with there that we see. Jose Siri. Loving the earrings. Ronnie Mauricio's locked in. He's been hitting tanks plenty in BP. Brandon Nimmo's looking yoked as ever. We love it, baby. We love it. And again, just great quality. Great quality. I love it so much. Mr. OMG deserves to come back. He does. I tend to agree with my friend. I really do. Manuel, thank you so much for the $2 holla. Really does mean a lot, buddy. Pete Alonso talking to the media there, as you guys saw. But now let's show you guys some more clips because there was a lot of other great takeaways that we saw. Hold on. Just this, too. I posted earlier, guys, Los Mets for 2025. You got Luis Angel Acuna chatting it up with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. And shortly after, they begin the conversation. It continues with a friend and Ronnie Mauricio joining them. And this is one thing that Juan Soto talked about, the wave of Latin players in this Latin mix in this Mets team. We're going to see this clubhouse so electric this year, with this being a point as to why. And I can't wait for it. There are a few things that I enjoy more in baseball than the culture dynamics that come along with it. So the way that Japanese players carry themselves is very impressive to me on respect, loyalty, and really how artsy that they go about their craft. It's very impressive. Hispanic players, Venezuelan, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Nicaraguan, Cuban, Colombian, especially in the case of a guy like Jose Quintana, whatever you may be. They usually have an aura with them. And they have an aura with them that's very extroverted a lot of the times. And more often than not is an infectious one that not only the clubhouse feeds off of, but also the fans. So when I think of not Juan Soto, when I think of Francisco Lindor, when he hit not one, not two, but 3 tanks against the Yankees in the Subway Series 3 years ago, and I remember vividly those Mets fans jumping on the Mets dugout with the Puerto Rican and Dominican flags. That is exactly the type of vibe that I'm alluding to. Think like World Baseball Classic-esque vibes, but constantly happening there with Soto, Lindor, Vientos, Alvarez, and everyone else in company doing their thing in Flushing, Queens. That is why I can't wait to see how this group's going to be together, the way that they're going to have so much fun with each other, too. Even a guy like Jose Siri on the lesser end, he might not seem like a big impact now, but he's going to be all part of the vibes. He'll be playing great defense, a lot of speed, obviously, and you're going to get the home run power for a guy that sits around the Mendoza line. There's a lot. There's going to be a lot of fun with this team, and I think when you look at the life and when you look at the electricity that comes in this lineup, not only offensively on the base pass, but defensively too, I think the Mets have a really nice balance of things versus where they've been over the past couple of years. 1200 with the $2 haul says, Montas, this is what we get for no Sapaki. Absolutely. Thank you so much for the donation. If you know, you know. Mark, you're not wrong. Yeah, I know. It's true. It's true. Us Americans, we're too vanilla sometimes, in my opinion. I think you guys know what I mean by that. It's nothing personal against all my guys on Team USA, but like, I want to see the Team USA baseball team have the vibes of the Team USA hockey team is having right now. With guys like the Kachuk brothers, JT Miller, Chris Kreider, everyone else. Like, they're hard-nosed. They're going, America. Like, they're locked in, you know? I don't get those same vibes with the baseball team. And I would like it to be that case. I really would. Hopefully we see that be the case once we get to the WBC in 2026. But guys, that is going to do it for our live show. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, please make sure to smash the like and subscribe on at some point on your way in or out. We've had 500 concurrent viewers throughout the entire live show. Help us get to 350 plus likes at any point in the live show or on replay. It really does mean a lot. Thank you guys again. We will take more of your comments, questions, and concerns. What about my dono and question? Jack, I missed it, brother. Let me go see if I can follow. Oh, my bad. It got caught right in between everything, Jack. Do you think Pete will break the record this year? Yes. If Pete Alonso doesn't break the home run record this year, then he should never be considered to return to the Mets beyond the season. It's 25 home runs. If Pete doesn't hit that, it's the lowest bar of his career. We got to get there. Yes, Alonso's absolutely hitting the home run record this year. No doubt in my mind. Same way there's no doubt in my mind that I'll be here same time, same place tomorrow, covering all things Mets for you guys on the platform, either live setting and or pre-recorded video, just a pre-recorded video, what have you. So be on the lookout. Stay tuned for more